Hi everybody, it's Stay Thrive and welcome back to another video. Today I will be doing a book discussion and review of Ring Shout. I read mine on my Kobo. So overall, I would rate this book probably a 6.5 or 7 out of 10. The reason why I rate it that is because it does have a very unique story concept. It has great theme, a great plot, and it has a lot of depth for such a small book. But this is a fantasy and horror type story, which isn't typically the type that I go for. And also because this book contains a lot of imagery and description. I'm not the type that mentally imagine things in my head. So if you say a book, I don't mentally imagine it. I just kind of think of it as a literal. For that reason, I feel like it was harder for me to fully appreciate this story because it was so descriptive and vivid imagery. I do think that if it was like in a video format that I would probably love this even more. But again, that's more personal preference. So I think for a lot of people, it might rate even higher than a 6.5 or a 7 because it's such a great story and it has such a unique story. So this book did teach me quite a lot. You know, maybe I just not as aware as other people, but I didn't know what a ring shout was. So when I saw the title Ring Shout, I didn't have any opinions about it. But this book did go over what a ring shout is. Another thing that I learned from this book was like Birth of a Nation. The original movie was more about glorifying white supremacy and the KKK and celebrating that. And I didn't know that before. So it is very interesting because I did see Birth of a Nation, the more recent movie. But it was okay. I saw it as a kid and it was okay. And I never knew like the historical context of it being a film that glorified, like I said, the KKK and white supremacy. So let's get into a discussion about the book. This discussion may contain spoilers. If you haven't read the book, then it might be best to come back to this discussion after you read the book. The book centers around Maurice and she hunts Ku Klux, her and her friends. So in this book, Maurice does distinguish between Ku Klux and clans. So for Ku Klux, they consider those to be the monsters and just completely evil and full of hatred. Whereas the clans, they consider them to still be human and have a chance of they consider the clans as human still and have a potential to be redeemed. I think Maurice makes this distinction to illustrate that there are, various levels of white supremacy. There's the people who are full of hatred and, go out of their way to spew the hatred. And then there's the people who are more so complicit. And I guess the book is trying to highlight that those who are more complicit might actually have a way of being redeemed. Butcher Clyde, and he feeds off hate. He asks Maurice to be the champion, and he says that Maurice's hate is justified. With Butcher Clyde saying this, it does lead me to wonder what he considers the champion, because he's also the one that leads the Ku Klux. And Maurice does point out that she doesn't trust Butcher Clyde when he asks her to be the champion, because she doesn't trust that he won't turn on her like he's doing the Ku Klux Klan if given the chance and find someone more powerful. Part of me thinks that this is mentioned in the book to point out two things: the commodification of Black culture. I think Maurice questioning Butcher Clyde is to point out the commodification of Black culture and how Black culture has been treated when it benefits those in power or white society, when they are able to profit or rebrand it as something cool. But for Black people, it's often stigmatized and seen as ratchet and ghetto, such as like bonnets, braids. Maybe one of the reasons why Maurice is hesitant to trust Butcher Clyde. I think another reason why Maurice is hesitant to trust Butcher Clyde is society and media have historically weaponized Black emotions. For example, when, Black people protest or show any kind of resistance towards something that they consider unfair or that is wrong, it's often labeled as a riot, dangerous. They have, an irrational or elevated fear of, Black people engaging in any kind of disruption or disagreement with what is considered the norm or what they consider to be right. One part of the book that I feel like I have to either reread, or maybe if you guys can join in on the discussion below so I can get a better understanding. But Dr. Bazette, I think that's how you say his name. He's supposed to represent like academia or institutions and how they have historically utilized Black bodies, even when it wasn't necessarily in the best interest of Black people, even if it harmed Black people. They utilized them for their own benefit. That was my interpretation of Dr. Bazette. I think in particular, the author's trying to point out like the medical field, but it could represent other institutions as well. But what are your thoughts on Dr. Bazette's and their role in the story? What do you think that the author is trying to point out by having Maurice go to Dr. Bazette for more information? In the end, Maurice is able to take down the Ku Klux by utilizing the ring shout and ghost spirits that have been harmed by the Ku Klux. I think that this was a very powerful move that the author could make because it demonstrates the resiliency of Black people and how we have historically and continuously utilized ancestral and spiritual strength to fight against hate and white supremacy. Thank you guys for watching my video. The next book that I'm reading is called All Her Little Secrets. So stay tuned for next week's video where I'm going to go over, this book, All Her Little Secrets, and my thoughts. Make sure you subscribe so that you hear the notification every time I post a new review. Thank you guys for watching. Bye-bye.